Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is time for another true crime video yet again, and today we will be talking about one of the most infuriating cases ever. Today we will be talking about the case of the Turpin 13. Louise Anna Turpin was born on May 24th, 1968 in Princeton, West Virginia, to her parents Alan and Phyllis Robinette. Growing up, Louise was a very religious girl and was even part of the choir. And just like the rest of her family, she was a devout Pentecostal Christian. From the outside, everything seemed normal. Louise was your average girl from a small town, but behind closed doors, her life was very different. Starting from a young age, Louise and her sister Teresa would be sexually violated by their own grandfather. And this would happen almost every single day. Their mother Phyllis would drop them off at their grandfather's house, well aware of what was going on. And instead of keeping her daughters away from her monster of a father, she would instead accept payment and get paid for this. Now, when Louise was 15, she met a guy named David Turpin. He was in his early 20s and was a member of the same church. Now, as soon as Louise turned 16, the pair ran away and got married, cutting off their parents almost completely. David Turpin was born on October 17th, 1961. He was a 23-year-old computer engineer that married a 16-year-old. So not a great guy right from the get-go. And since their whole community knew of this illegal relationship, David and Louise then moved to Fort Worth, Texas, and had their first child when Louise was 20. The two remained extremely religious and were convinced that God called upon them to have as many children as they can. And here in Fort Worth, they had their first 8 kids. Now, back when they had only 4 children, Louise's sister Teresa lived with them for a while. And during her stay with the family, she noticed a few odd things, like how frail and tiny the kids looked compared to how old they actually were. She also noticed how strict David and Louise were, to the point where the children would have to ask for permission to sit, stand, or talk to their Aunt Louise. They also asked for permission if they were allowed to eat. Now, Teresa thought that this was just a very strange parenting tactic. When she asked Louise why the kids were so skinny, Louise simply said that they were probably going to be tall and lanky like their father David, and she completely laughed it off. During Teresa's stay with the Turpins, there were a lot of odd occurrences. However, what made her pack her bags was the time when she was showering. David and Louise had unlocked the doors and stood there watching her shower. From then on, Teresa would only be able to talk to her sister on the phone. In one of these phone calls, Louise told Teresa that she and David no longer trusted the Pentecostal church and are venturing out and learning about different religions, and were trying to find something that would fit their lifestyle. Now, they weren't able to find one that was a match for them, so they decided to mash up a bunch of different beliefs or different facets from different beliefs and create their own religion. At one point, they also dabbled into witchcraft, and I don't know how that worked out for them, but they created a religion of their own. In 1998, David filed for bankruptcy, and after this, the entire family completely withdrew from the world. At this point, they had 8 kids, and whoever was studying was pulled out from elementary school. Their eldest child, Jennifer, only managed to get through grade 3 or the 3rd grade before being homeschooled by her parents. By 1999 or 2000, the Turpins then moved to Rio Vista, Texas, and this would only isolate them from the rest of the world even further. Their neighbors were weirded out but said nothing. According to some of these neighbors, the kids would be seen doing yard work at around 4 a.m. and they would be doing their chores around the same time. These kids were also seen multiple times marching in their rooms in the middle of the night. But again, no one said anything or no one reported anything to anyone. Now, in the same Rio Vista home, the Turpins had yet again another 4 children, bringing the total to 12 kids. They were all abused, all neglected, all starved. At one point, one of the neighbors were able to see these kids up close, and she thought that they were wearing gloves for gardening because of how light the skin on their hands were compared to the rest of their bodies. And when she took notice of this, one of the kids suddenly said that they were only allowed to wash up until their wrists to not waste water. At some point during their stay in Rio Vista, David and Luis also decided to put a massive trailer on the back of their lawn and moved all of their 12 kids there. Now, for some reason, the two decided to hit the road and go on random adventures and would drop groceries off from time to time. According to Teresa, Luis's sister, the two had this phase wherein they just loved to party and had numerous sexual ventures. She, I have no idea what they did the last 3 years, but I guess that's what they did. They partied and fed their sexual aversions, I guess. Now, as I've mentioned, they would drop off groceries for the kids from time to time. However, these groceries were never enough. And most of the time, the children would result to eating just ice and ketchup, or even worse, grass off of their lawn. Their eldest child, Jennifer, was tasked to punish her siblings if they acted out. And as a teenager, she didn't know any better, and all she knew was how they were raised. And at first, they all thought that being chained up to their beds or being locked up in dog kennels were normal forms of punishment. Now, the Bible was used a lot to threaten these kids. Their parents would tell them that they had the right to kill them if they wanted to because they were their parents. These kids were fed once a day if they were lucky, and while their parents enjoyed good food and hot meals 3 times a day, these kids were living off of peanut butter sandwiches. And if they were caught stealing food, they would get punished. As I've mentioned, they would be chained up to their beds or locked up in dog kennels, and then they would be starved for days on end. They were also not allowed to take baths, and if they were chained up or locked up in crates, if they had to go, they wouldn't have any choice but to go right then and there. They were also never taken to the doctor, and they were never given any medication, even if they were sick. Now, they were very dirty and unkempt. The clothes they wore were never washed as well. Now, one of the Turpin kids also made an attempt to run away and get some help at some point. This was one of their daughters who managed to escape and call for help. She was then seen by some neighbors. However, she was never allowed to speak to others, and since they were homeschooled by their parents, this child's vocabulary was very limited, and she spoke in what was described to be kind of a strange manner. She was also extremely malnourished and looked very young for the age she claimed to be. So the neighbors thought that she was making this up, maybe she was lying, and instead of helping this child and calling the authorities, these neighbors decided to bring her back to her parents instead. Now, in one of the interviews, the eldest Turpin kid, Jennifer, recalled how she had no friends in elementary school, saying that she got picked on a lot. And back then, she didn't really know why no one wanted to talk to her, but looking back now, she says she now knows that it was because of how dirty she was, and that because she smelled bad. After 10 years of living in Rio Vista, the entire family then moved to Paris, California, in a pretty good neighborhood too, with those cookie cutter type houses. They had their youngest child there, which meant they now had 13 in total. That's why they're called the Turpin 13. Now, the reason why they moved to California was because their house in Texas or in Rio Vista was foreclosed. And the new homeowners, the people who bought the house, was mortified with what they saw. At first, they thought they got a good deal because this house was heavily discounted, but when they saw the shape that it was in, they were mortified. The Turpins' old neighbors also finally got a glimpse of what this house was like inside. The house was a complete dump. It was extremely dirty and it smelled terrible. There were scratches on the wall, which they all thought were from animals who might have gotten in once the Turpins left. But we all know by now that this was probably from the kids. The kids probably made these scratches on the walls when they were tied up or chained up. Bunk beds with rotting mattresses were also left, and there were still ropes and chains hanging from the bed frames. But again, no one said anything and nothing was ever reported. Now, one weird thing about David and Louise was the fact that they really loved Vegas and Disney. I mean, they loved these places so much that they would bring all 13 children there and make them wear matching outfits and force them to smile for photo ops. According to some of the kids who were recently interviewed, they did enjoy going out. They did enjoy going to Vegas and Disney because for them it was a day for them to be normal kids. It was a day for them to live normal lives. However, once they got back home, it was the same thing. They would be punished again. They would be abused again. According to the eldest kid, Jennifer, I saw this on her TikTok, but she did mention that most of the time when they were out, people would come up to either David or Luis and tell them that, oh, you have so many kids, but they're so well behaved. You must be so proud. And their parents would say something along the lines of, yes, we're so proud. We love them so much. Our kids are great, blah, blah, blah. But behind closed doors, these kids were being abused. And this went on for years until January 14th, 2018 at 5:49 a.m. when the 8th Turpin child, Jordan, made the decision to escape. She escaped by crawling out of a window without her parents knowing, and with her was a disconnected phone. Now, even though this phone was disconnected, it could still be used to call 911, and that is exactly what Jordan did. And this 911 call is extremely heartbreaking.
911 emergency, what are you reporting?
Help.
This is 911, do you have an emergency?
I just ran away from home.
Do you know what street you're on?
No. I just ran away from home because I live in a family of 15, okay? Can you hear me? And we have abusing parents. Did you hear that?
Okay, how did they abuse you?
Okay. They hit us, they throw us across, they like to throw us across the room. They pull our hair, they yank out our hair. I have my two little sisters right now are chained up.
Okay, how old are you?
I'm 17.
What's your name?
Jordan Turpin.
Okay, I'm going to connect you to the sheriff's department so that they can help
What?
you. One moment, don't hang up.
Do you know if your parents keep any kind of weapons in the house?
I think that my father has a gun.
Have you seen the guns?
No. but they've talked about it.
Dad's name
He
is?
is Turpin. I don't know much about my mother. He doesn't like us. He doesn't spend time with us ever.
Does anybody at the house take any kind of medication?
Oh, I don't know what medication
Any
is.
medicine?
When we have a cold, sometimes we take Gurbuxani. He's 2. He's 11, 12, 14, 16. I'm 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 20, I think 5, 29.
I just want to stay on the phone with you. How did you get this phone that you have?
It was a phone that my brother had that he was going to throw away, and I had to have a way to contact somebody like you, so I got it so I could call 911.
And you guys don't have any friends or anybody who comes over to the house?
Hi. Okay.
Is that the deputy?
Okay. Yes.
Go talk to him, okay?
Yes.
All right, bye-bye.
When the deputy arrived, he asked Jordan questions, and you can see how nervous she was. It was her first time talking to anyone outside of their family, and she was so scared that this police officer wouldn't believe her and would just return her to her parents. And she knew that if this did happen, they would kill her. Now, the deputy admitted to thinking when he received the phone call that this was a great and pretty chill way to end his shift. It was probably one of those runaway cases wherein he would just return the kid home. However, it was way more than that. Jordan then showed him photos as proof, and in these pictures, you could see at least 3 kids who were tied up. Turns out Jordan and her sister Jennifer had been planning this escape for the past 2 years. And they took photos knowing that people might not believe them.
Hi, what's going on?
Okay. I just ran away from home,
Okay,
and I live in a family of 15.
okay.
My 2 little sisters right now are chained up.
They're chained up?
Yes,
Where are they chained up at?
on the bed. Now, Mother didn't chain them up just to be mean. Okay. They're chained up because they stole Mother's food.
Uh-huh.
But I'm sorry if I talk too much. Okay. I've never talked to anybody out there, so I've never been alone with a person, so this is very hard for me to talk. Okay.
How do your parents know you left your house?
No, they don't.
Do you take any medication?
What's medication?
Medication?
Yeah, what's medication?
Do you take pills? Do you take pills?
Oh, I
For-
don't think I've ever taken a pill before. Our parents are abusing. They abuse us. But the reason I called and the reason I managed to get out here, this is one of the most scariest things I've ever done.
Uh-huh.
I'm terrified. But I called because my 2 little sisters, they're chained up right now.
Do you have pictures of that?
Yes, I can show you. I actually didn't have it, and then one of my sisters told me I need to get pictures.
You have pictures of your sisters chained up?
Yes, but they're in here. Okay. I don't have proof of everything, but I have proof that my sisters are chained up. Here, you can look at them. See, those are the places that make it on them. And see how dirty she is? We're so filthy. We don't take baths. We don't.
How did your sisters get like this?
Okay.
Your parents chained them up?
Yes, because they stole food.
Okay.
But they stole it because they were hungry.
Who took this picture?
I did. I took those pictures.
Okay. You make sure to save these, okay?
Okay, I will.
Don't get rid of those.
I will. I won't.
An hour and a half after Jordan made that 911 call, a team of police officers showed up in front of their house and arrested David and Louise Turpin, who were at this point still unaware that one of their kids had escaped and called the police. David and Louise were then taken into custody, while all 13 children were brought to the hospital to get checked. And yes, I have been referring to them as kids this entire time. But the eldest, Jennifer, was actually 29 years old when they were rescued. She was 29 and she weighed only 37 kilos. She was the same age as me when she got out of this situation. and the youngest child that David and Luis had in California was only 2 years old at the time. Now, as I have mentioned, all of these kids were examined and all 13 were severely malnourished and mentally underdeveloped. And some of them even had heart issues and difficulty walking due to the lack of nutrition. One of the kids, who was in their preteens, even had arms the size of a 4.5-month-old's. And once all of this came out, their former neighbors denied having any knowledge about what was going on, even though some of them admitted to seeing very strange things. Even though one of them saw two of the Turpin boys rummaging through the garbage cans in the middle of the night to look for food. These kids were failed by all of the adults around them, but it sadly does not end there. The underage kids were put into foster care under a couple named Mr. and Mrs. O. And they again had to endure and relive everything that their parents put them through. These evil foster parents tortured and abused them for another 3 years. Now, the kids tried to report this to the agency, the ChildNet Youth and Family Services, but no action was ever taken. Sometimes they would be starved. Sometimes they would be given excessive amounts of food. And if they threw up, they would also be forced to eat their own vomit, which is vile. This Mr. and Mrs. O would also repeatedly tell them how worthless they were and would even suggest for the kids to just take their own lives. Now, the kids filed lawsuits against ChildNet Youth and Family Services, and things are finally starting to look up for them. The ones who are still minors are put under the care of the state, and the ones who are already adults are starting to live normal lives. Jennifer and Jordan are the only ones speaking out about this and have been doing a great job of respecting their siblings' wishes to conceal their identities and not talk to the media. On February 2019, David and Luis Turpin pleaded guilty to 1 count of torture, 3 counts of willful child cruelty, 4 counts of false imprisonment, and 6 counts of cruelty to an adult dependent. They were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Mr. and Mrs. O, as well as their biological daughter, the foster family of the underage Turpin kids, were also arrested and charged with false imprisonment and child cruelty. And as usual, that's pretty much all that I have for today's case. This just makes me really angry and sad at the same time. These kids endured so much, and I'm just so angry at the adults around them, especially the neighbors. I mean, this was going on for almost 30 years and no one said anything, no one did anything to help these kids. I mean, even their teachers. I have mentioned this a few times before, but I was once a teacher. And to me, if I see that one of my students was dirty and seemed like she wasn't being taken care of, I probably would have said something. I mean, maybe not directly to the police right away, but I might have reported this to the principal or our headmistress to see if we could do anything to help or figure out what was going on in this child's home life. But I mean, Jennifer was in school up until the 3rd grade, and none of the teachers said anything. She remembered having dirty clothes, dirty hair, no friends, but nothing. No one did anything. And their neighbors, who saw these kids doing yard work at 4 a.m., saw them marching in their room in the middle of the night, didn't report anything to the authorities either, and that just infuriates me. I mean, I saw one of the interviews with some of the neighbors, and they said that they wanted to mind their own business. But I mean, yeah, if kids are getting abused, if kids are being starved, treated poorly, say something. This was a very heavy one. But yeah, as I've mentioned, I really want to know your thoughts on this. And thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you guys on my next video.